I've heard you say it's estimated that mycorrhizal fungi expand a tree's ability to capture nutrients and moisture from the soil by a factor of 100 to 1,000 times, in part because they so dramatically increase the absorptive surface area of tree roots. And then, to quote your book again, one of the miracles of fungi is the fact that 100 pounds of wood can turn into nearly 130 pounds of high protein mushroom bodies. I know you've worked with mushrooms a lot. It's an intimidating subculture. What would you say to make it seem less intimidating? Don't grow poison stuff.
Well, because this also goes to the whole sparkly object syndrome and the expert thing. Anybody who does something, most people want to be an expert in it, and there's a perfect way and a right way to do it, and you have to be perfectly sterile and on and on and on and on. Well, you know what? Mushrooms rot wood. They do. So if you cut this tree down and you inoculate it with mushroom spawn, I'll buy mushroom spawn of a strain that I like that eats this kind of wood. I'll buy it from a friend of mine. I use Field and Forest products in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, and I'll use oyster mushrooms on most species. And they give you instructions with the sawdust spawn. You get a block, probably like the size of a 5-pound bag of sugar. It's like $20. So you get that, and it will make a dozen totems where you cut here's a log, like a chunk of firewood. You cut it into 3 pieces, and you put a little bit on the bottom underneath it. You put it in a plastic bag first, put a little on the bottom underneath it, you put a little on top of that. Next log, put a little bit more, and then the next log on top of that, you put a little cookie on top. Close up the bag for a couple, 3 months, then you put it out in the shade somewhere. Very precise, very careful. And I did that for a number of years because, I have lots of wood available now because I planted tons of trees. I got to rot it somehow. I might as well eat it. I wasn't satisfied with making 12 little totems this big with mushrooms. So I started experimenting with inoculating whole entire trees. And so what I did is I drastically reduced the amount of spawn that I was using, cut down like a hybrid poplar tree. I did, I think it was 32, 40-foot tall hybrid poplar trees, some of them 1.5 feet diameter. I dropped the spring and I inoculated them with oyster mushroom. One of the trees from last year that I had inoculated had over 200 pounds of mushrooms on it. It's just rotten wood. What really blows my mind about mushrooms is they now spread spores everywhere. So I've got Pohu oyster mushrooms that have naturalized out here. I have shiitake mushrooms that have naturalized here. It's lion's mane, and I wish that would naturalize because that's one of my favorites. But you think about this stuff. They found fungus on the control rods inside 3 Mile Island when they cracked open that containment vessel. Fungus is amazing stuff. You can't kill it. They say you have to use it pretty quick. Keep it in your fridge no more than like a week or 2. I just lob it in the freezer. I got stuff like 3, 4, 5 years old. It's in suspended animation. It still works. It's great. So there's all kinds of things that we're told by experts that are true and accurate and measured with an amazing precision, and they're not necessary. They're not necessary.
Yeah.
So how do we learn what actually is necessary and what we can get away without? And think about fungus again for a second. This blows my mind to this day. How is it that this mushroom can take wood, which is lignin and cellulose, carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen came from the air. We've all seen trees growing out of rocks. They don't need soil. They actually make the soil by secreting sugars and decaying roots and leaves and all that. They actually make the soil. So you've got this carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, the lignin and cellulose, that a mushroom now turns this carbohydrate into a protein. How? What? It uses some of the double carbon bonds in there, breaks it apart. That's the energy to run itself. Then it takes the other stuff and it tinker toys it back together, adds a little sulfur and a little nitrogen to it, and now it's a protein. That is an absolute miracle that we can turn wood into meat. That's just amazing to me.
Yeah, it's like mushroom alchemy.
Yep,
So
it is.
Yeah, I mean, if you are farming mushrooms, obviously it's a lot lower risk. I wasn't sure, based on some previous interviews and comments made in passing, if you occasionally were foraging, which is where it gets a little dicey, because obviously toxicity is out there. Some mushrooms look like other mushrooms. That's a bit
Well,
scary.
well, foraging, I do forage. I am a glorified hunter gatherer. The thing is, though, is I don't have to go looking for something because I know where it is because I put it there. If you guys, here's another person to interview is Sam Thayer. He's written a couple of books on foraging. He's an amazing forager. He came on a tour once, and we're walking along the tour, and I'm talking about what I'm talking about, waving my hands all over the place. And he said, "Oh, hey everybody, look! Do you know what this is? Look what I found! It's an XYZ PDQ." I was like, "Yeah, I put it there." And so now the mushrooms, they put out spores, they spread, they naturalize. This is a fully functioning ecosystem. It takes care of itself. My job now is to harvest whatever yield I can, and then to manage the system to keep it in the most productive phase for me and my marketing strategy. And what's important for me is that there's enough sunlight reaching the ground to have a good heavy grass cover, because the heavy grass cover is what feeds the cattle and the hogs. So I want to make sure that it stays open. And once it starts to close canopy, the grass doesn't get enough light, it starts to die away. That's when I go in, and if the trees aren't dying fast enough, I go in and I remove some. Well, when I remove it, what do? The bottom log can become a saw log. What you see behind me this is a building. I'm inside a building that I grew. Got that? I grew this building.
I like it.
Well, then the next level of wood, next diameter becomes mushroom logs. Then the next diameter down becomes firewood. Then the next diameter down gets laid across the path, and it chips up, and a different kind of mushroom is what colonizes that and breaks that down, and that's now fertilizer. So I open up the canopy. That's work, but I yielded lumber, firewood, mushrooms, mulch, and it opens up for more grass. So now I can have more cows. So that we're ecosystem managers now, keeping it at the stage, the phase, which is most productive for us. Which, for my lifetime, it's going to be semi-open savanna.
Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1 hour interviews, you get the full 2 hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to thehighersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right. The Higher Side Chat Show.